It's the 12th day of January 2022. Hope everybody's doing reasonably well on this Thursday, the last day of the week for us. We start I'm going to cover Geoff, the Manchurian candidate, I think. I'll explain myself in a moment. I'm Dana Durnford. The nuclear industry calls me Gamma Goat, and I'm available at 709-589-4406. I'll leave it up there for you for another... Oops, I lied. Sue me. Geoff. My goodness. Where did it all go wrong for you, Geoff? Let me see. We got a poll tonight that doesn't make any sense for most people, I'm pretty sure. Until we get going. Unfortunately, then for Geoff, certainly, it'll make some sense. Should mass murder, that's our first nudge, wink, wink, pew, 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 hint, hint. Geoff Brumfiel, senior editor, correspondent at the National Public Radio Science Desk, apologize to the Japanese and birds and mammals and animals and humans and insects and we got our first caller of the night. Hello, caller.
Hello.
You're live on National Public Non-Radio Dana Durnford Show.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, you're certainly welcome. How's it going, Mike? What you got first tonight? Anything?
Yeah, I like to talk about Dr. Kevin Blanch and how much I respect him, and through you, I understand the power of the man that he is.
Yeah, Kevin's not doing good. He's made it through the surgery. I guess you've seen that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to take a few days for him before we can figure out. First couple of days after a major surgery like that is very dangerous times. I'm going to try to reach out to him and see if he can come on for a minute, maybe, because he's still under painkillers and everything else. He's just barely sitting up, right? Sounds good. Anything else you want to throw to Mike?
Yeah, well, I think that if he was on an advisory board of some sort, he would be a very valuable asset to a brain trust on these type of topics.
Who are we talking about?
Well, us.
Okay, I see. I got distracted. I'm sorry, Mike. Okay. I have to think about it. That's for sure. Have you got anything else you'd like to bring up there, Mike?
Well, I'm sorry if I interrupted your flow.
Nope.
You've done once before.
No, it's all good.
You called me soon and you interrupted me. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's all good, my friend. Thank you. Good topic. I'm glad you brought it up. Okay, Mike. You take care.
Good night.
Yeah, good night. And so we got Kevin Blanch just went through open heart surgery where they actually had to crack him open. I'm going to reach out to him in a little bit with a text message. The A-10 Warthog only shoots dirty bombs. It shoots 1.5 tons a minute. And dirty bombs are disease factories, just like nuclear power plants. The A-10 Warthog is a monster, and so are these. These are incredible madness. This is Reactor 4. We'll be bringing that up with Geoff in a little tiny bit. Reactor 3, which was a mixed oxide fuel facility. These were 190-foot buildings. The official story is that everything is perfect. That's the official pictures. That's the official pictures. And bear with me. Always give me a hard time. And I'll do 3 of them again for you. So that's official one of Reactor 3 and 4. 3 to your left, 4 to your right. That's 3 to your left. They put a fake cover on it, and the same thing with Reactor 4. And then they pretended it looked like the building to your left when it actually looks like the building to your right. Now, Geoff, my goodness. You're so evil. Where did your parents go wrong? Or was this on purpose? Should mass murderer Geoff Brumfiel, senior editor, corresponds. Now, he was at nature.com for quite a few years. He was born in America. And let's explore that for 1 minute, because that's really interesting. Now, trying to find like Wikipedia or something on him. He's got all kinds of .orgs with the same couple of paragraphs and same pictures. You can see him up to page 5. He's got 5 pages like this, but we got nothing where it tells you, is he married, who his parents were. There's no, for such a public person, he's not very public, is all I can say. We're going to cover stories from 2011, 2012. It's going to be a 2-part series. Geoff is actually that wicked. And it's self-explanatory coming up. So before we get into all the lies and deceit and deception, many could now safely return home, yet the mistrust of the government prolongs their exit. And they're talking about 40 kilometers away in Lydia, and this is a nuclear wasteland, as everybody knows, right? Many could safely return home. This is 2012, on the 7th of March, 4 days before the first anniversary. 24,000 becquerels a kilogram, and multiply that by 64 to get a square meter of cesium. Now, of course, there's 1,000 fission products you got to worry about. 250 kilometers away. So these are huge numbers. These are massive numbers. 250 kilometers away. And maybe I should bring up the calculator just for that number in particular, right? So you got 24, oh, that's not working. 24,000 coming up. That's a kilogram times 64 is a square meter. 1.5 million becquerels per square meter. This is a catastrophic zone. Where'd that other guy come from? So just trying to paint you a picture before we get into it. It's a very interesting story, I must admit. Top cancer doctor, nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. Man-made anthropogenic radiation. Irreversible heart damage with children at 50 becquerels a kilogram of just cesium. You got cesium, you got these gamma emitters. There's many different types of isotopes for gamma. Same thing for alphas, betas, and neutrons. And they're pulsing energy for the rest, millions of years, almost at the speed of light, almost at 186,000 miles per second. So if they're in your body, they're wrecking your chromosomes, your DNA, your organs, you're saturating your thyroid glands, and you're producing radioactive hormones, particularly children and females in particular, 4 times more vulnerable, and this is applicable to all species, not just humans. So 50 becquerels a kilogram is irreversible heart damage for children. And 250 kilometers away, it's 24,000 in just one spot. 11 becquerels a kilogram, they start to see heart problems. This was based on a Chernobyl study. These are 1-ton bags. Whenever you see that, that's 1-ton bags. There's 30 plus million of them. So 11 becquerels a kilogram, and the food standard is 100, but they're only checking for cesium, but obviously they're not checking for anything. And the reason we say that is pretty straightforward. I'll give you another one more demonstration before we jump back in. Is the cancer rates in the first year was 865,000 extra cancer patients, but there's 1,800 diseases besides cancer. Cancer is just one. And it's latent. It's usually the last one to show up. All right, you with me so far? Back to the NPR. Blah, blah, blah. They got 1,200 employees, 440. So how many Geoff Brumfiels are there at this place, I wonder? They got a huge audience, 48 million weekly, 1,000 plus stations broadcasting their propaganda, 35 bureaus. These are monster propaganda machines. 31.6 million weekly victims. 16 million more victims. And 1 million app users. The list goes on and on and on. Okay, we're getting there. I'm going to play an interview with Geoff, if that's his real name. That's a joke, by the way. This is 2012, and he's going to talk about Fukushima. He's going to talk about Fukushima.
Very long time.
And let me see if you can figure out on your own what's wrong with this picture.
If ever, before we see,
hang on. The audio's not booted in. Oh, crap. Let me see if I can resolve it. It's gone to the wrong one. Sorry. Just give me a second. I'm usually pretty good with this kind of stuff. I got no idea. Might have to pass on that one. I just want to see if I'm lucky enough to... I don't have... Yeah, new tech.
Nuclear power.
Okay.
I think that for the most part, people who are, for nuclear power have remained for nuclear power post-Fukushima, and people who are against it have remained against it. I guess the big difference I've seen is just a heightened awareness of the dangers that nuclear power poses, of the possibility of a meltdown, which, people had sort of receded in people's memory. It had been 25 years since Chernobyl. Chernobyl was an old reactor design anyway, and so I think people had sort of forgotten that this sort of thing could happen. And I guess what I think Fukushima does is it reminds everyone that accidents will happen and of the real economic costs. And I think that's where the real problem with Fukushima is. It's not the threat that it posed to human health. As far as we can tell, very few people were made sick, if anyone, from the accident. Even the workers seem to have escaped relatively with low doses.
Little bit of a demon, are we? He's a bit of a demon, that feller. Okay, so we're gonna go through a few of his stories that he done back there in 2011 for Nature.com. And I should be back here. For Nature.com. And just tear apart. Now, he's smart. He is smart enough to write the stories. I'm not sure he did write the stories. It's way more likely it's a public relation firm, right? Now, he got the 2013 News Award. We'll probably get to that after. For covering Fukushima. And his coverage of Fukushima was hideous. Away we go. But outside observers and even some critics in Japan are increasingly worried about the loss of public trust. So, you have a catastrophic event, and they're framing the conversation as loss of public trust. And public trust is what they built up. It's an illusion, right? Where everybody lives in this fantasy land, and all of a sudden they woke up and realized, because the system has always been the way it is, but people are being asleep. And when they wake up to an event, they get a little glimpse, and they start wondering to themselves, wait a second, are they just evil now, or is this all the time? And if they stay on that trail, they discover that people like Geoff are evil. That is who they are. That's why they got the job in the first place. Is they're missing some chromosomes. And you see the way he talks, where he chews on the side of his face, and he talks to the one side. I would imagine that's inbreeding. That's why you can't find anything about his parents. Desperation to regain it could undermine rational decisions about the cleanup and the resettlement. And so, I don't think he's Mr. Dr. Evil Genius. I think he's just Dr. Evil. And just another useful idiot for the industry. And that's what they recognized in him in university was, hey, right? We got a perfect little lapdog here, and he'll kill everybody to keep his job and maintain his position in society, and that's what he covets. He doesn't cover things like, like if you got a pet, he probably doesn't know how to pet it. Could undermine rational decisions making, talking, cleanup, and resettlement. And this is the first year you can't resettle in a nuclear wasteland with 30 million one-ton bags. So you shouldn't be talking about it. Undermined, that's his job, by the way, is to undermine the victims. Rational decisions, make them think that they're coming up with their own decision rather than you telling them what a decision options are. To leave it up to the victims. Well, what do you want to do? Well, I don't know. I'm not a nuclear scientist. Oh, really? But outside observers like ourselves, so water flooded the emergency generators. Now think about, when you're hearing stuff like that, what is he talking about? flooded outside generators. Because when you look at it, it's a little bit more significant than flooded. This was hitting at 600 kilometers per hour originally, right? Get back on track here. Well, radioactive decay, which is a pretty... So the radioactive... When you hear the word radioactive decay, that's really deceitful stuff, right? Because there's the radioactive decay, covers the whole planet in 19 and a half days, 468 hours. What have I got done now? Sorry, we're getting there. So, in the control room, which they never went back for 7 years, but apparently they went into reactor 4 and reactor 3, everything was perfect. Now, at the accident, this is reactor 4 to your left. These were 190-foot buildings, and number 3 to the right. So if that was your original properties, you came back and seen that, would you think that you had a property anymore? Would you go in there and put the kettle on? Would you? And when you look at reactor 4 from 4 sides, it's impossible not to know that the reactor core, up right here, and the fuel pools are at the top of it, decades of reactor cores. Think of each building as having 10 reactor cores because you don't have a repository anywhere in the planet, let alone Japan. And the fuel pools are stuffed. There's 70 reactors like it in America. Volatile radioactive chemicals, and then they mention iodine-131, which is, it should be chlorine-38, or it should be curium isotopes, which is the biggest byproduct of the radiative fuel rods. But notably iodine-131 cesium, which is a British pronunciation of 137. So the gammas, which is cesium, alphas, neutrons, betas, they pulse energy at the speed of light. They hit each other, but they don't mesh. They change direction. That's known as an X-ray. And with his education, he would actually know all of this. But so he didn't write it per se. He put his name on it and sold it to the audience that were following his other. It's a really despicable job to have. You've got to be in the know to get a job like that. And you got to come from a certain inbreeded family line, basically, to get jobs like this. Right? Your parents were scumbags, and his parents were scumbags, and their parents were scumbags, and they're going to grow up to be a scumbag too, and everything's paid for. Volatile radioactive chemicals, no, and he's no, like, in many senses, Geoff is no different than several thousand, tens of thousands of journalists that we covered over the years, actually, right? Tens and tens of thousands of academics, too. And it's just scum. But Geoff was in a unique position, that's all. Nature.com is considered a coveted, which is actually, it's a mistake to covet Nature.com because of we've covered them quite a lot over the years because of their deceit and dishonesty. Volatile radioactive chemicals. Talking about iodine-131 is so dishonest. Despite the fact we had 20 million particles of iodine-131 per liter rainfall in North America, sustained. And there was 220 million atoms of iodine-131 with a 15 million year half-life, sustained for weeks and weeks and weeks. This is why we lost all the species in the last 11 years. So volatile cesium and iodines began to stream to there. Now, to be fair, that's what all the scum, degenerate, monstrous media was reporting, these particular isotopes. And they were rolling out a lot of the old dinosaur apologists for the industry at the same time. Strontium found in 2,200 locations in Fukushima. And by the way, strontium doesn't peak until the first 1,000 days. And it's a 100-to-1 ratio of the cesium-137. All right, okay? Not surprisingly, Yokohama, 250 kilometers away. So far, far away. Well, if you're going to, once it starts peaking, it's tens of thousands of days. So it's going to be there, but not in the actual quantity you're going to start seeing later. Cesium-137, which is a despicable British nuclear industry's pronunciation. And it always bugs me because, but you know who's in the story whenever you see that word. You know that's a British public relation firm that wrote the story. When Unit 4 at Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded in 1986, the Soviet government imposed a strict information blackout. And this could hardly have been more different at Fukushima, says Geoff, or whoever wrote the actual story. Within the first 24 hours, the government began reporting radiation readings. Sure they did. And I caught a unicorn the other day, and we're best friends. Over 1 million people in Japan still living in areas with high radiation exposures. Previous limits in rice was just 0.1 becquerel a kilogram. Now it's 1,000 times higher. But actually, it was 500 becquerels a kilogram for the first year. Right? This was just after they changed it down to 100. This is why you'll see coming up. In the following days and weeks, the deluge of information became swollen with data from university degenerates, the military scumbags, international fake monitors, and representatives of the U.S. scumbag government and concerned citizen scientists. The ultimate insult when you hear words like that. We almost got too much, said the crazies. The Secretary of the United Nations, which is Eisenhower described as the military-industrial complex. George W. Bush called them by their name, the New World Order, multiple times. Scientific committee, unclear on the effects. You got IRPA and the IPCC and the IAEA, and they all argue with each other, but they're all the exact same organization. It's complete control opposition, right? And they've taken over your planet. They're the atomic plague. They have proliferated upon every species now. Radiation forecast, by the way, in Japan was kept secret to avoid panic in the whole of society. Sounds a hell of a lot different than your version of it. 6 months China unpicked the data. Well, the model showed what 19.5 days actually does. Covers the entire planet with a continuous plume. And this model is only based on venting. And radioactive fallout for 80 years is global warming, by the way. Gas, coal, and oil emissions don't make plumes covering the planet. That's a nuclear shit. And nuclear pulses energy every second. You can't get rid of energy, see? It's pulsing at every second in the environment. Every day there's more produced. Every fuel pool and every reactor building on the entire planet is hemorrhaging radiation because the fuel, radiation waste, the problem with radioactive waste nobody bothers telling you is it's still splitting the atoms. So every day you're bioaccumulating into the environment. Just a sickening, just a horrific, catastrophic event for all species. The committee will deliver its preliminary findings in May. Because, hey, nuclear meltdowns don't matter anymore. We'll tell you in May. Don't worry about it. Okay, thank you, UN. You're so brave and strong. It is already evident that the rapid evacuation, careful screening, of course, they hid the models and didn't evacuate the people. I'll show you that coming up. Protected the Fukushima citizens. The bosses of them who pays the bill, they're the boss, right? From harm, really. So the rapid evaporation, you mean 865,000 extra cancers a year spike is protecting people, isn't it? How about congenital heart disease, which is probably what happened to Geoff? rose 14% after Fukushima, which is per 100,000 live births, 14.2% actually, is 14,200 newborns need open heart surgery. No. It totally protected them, Dana. And Wolfgang Weiss, we've covered him years ago, banana peddling piece of work of art. A physicist at Germany's Federal Office for Radiation Protection, Germany, which got rid of all their reactors immediately after, and chair of the degenerate unscare. Well, UN had quite a few years later, had another representative, Bashkuk Tunjak, I think his name. We've played him over the years quite a few times.
His name is Mr. Bashkuk Tunjak.
Earlier this morning, the mandate issued a press release on the situation in Fukushima, and this is one of the cases that's mentioned in the report. In the press release, we're urging the Japanese authorities to halt the relocation of children and women of reproductive age to areas of Fukushima that exceed levels of radiation that were considered safe before the nuclear disaster. After the nuclear disaster, the government of Japan raised the acceptable level of exposure from 1 millisievert per year to 20 millisieverts per year. And we're quite concerned, in particular for the health and well-being of children who may be raised or born in Fukushima.
It'd be hard-pressed to find anywhere in Fukushima below 20 millisieverts, 20,000 microsieverts. These are absurd numbers, by the way. And I'll tell you why. Because Fukushima Prefecture is just one of 14 prefectures that 55 countries banned the food from for a decade. Not Canada, of course, but actual countries. Canada removed all the restrictions after 93 days. And so that's why everybody in Canada is sick. Japan couldn't ship it anywhere, only Canada, for the first 10 years. And they did. So Fukushima's in the center. All these other places were banned. America, Canada never had had no ban on the food from any of Japan. All of Japan was covered. But 14 prefectures, when you got this much people won't take food from, do you really think the rest of it is not radioactive too? When you had 8 fuel pools and 4 reactor cores melt down. Unclear, the degenerate of the degenerate. Early informal analyst by his colleagues, unclear. That's Weiss, right? Wolfgang. Suggests no members of the public received a dangerous dose of radiation, despite the 865,000 extra cancers, despite the 14,200 out of 100,000 neonates and infants needs open heart surgery because of congenital malformation. Despite that, no one got any damage. Like in Taiwan, they told people to stay home because of the radioactive fallout. Take off your clothes, leave it, put it in bags, and get rid of it. They've done the same thing in South Korea. And the rain in California had catastrophic numbers, not 10 times, 10 million times more radioactivity than shook South Korea and Taiwan into telling their citizens to stay home. They're citizens. The people of the same planet, humans just like them, but with brains and hearts and souls. High radiation levels near Tokyo linked to Fukushima. So this was after a single rainfall was 29 million becquerels a square meter in the soil. These, my Geiger counter I got up there is evacuation zone pre-Fukushima for anywhere. Now it's like, it's only 167. That's not bad today. 29 million, it means you're supposed to evacuate Tokyo, which is 250 kilometers away, basically. With a 78 billion yen they're going to do a survey to monitor the health of 2 million people. Of course, when you look at how much food was contaminated in the prefecture and how bad Tokyo with 36 million people, they're being dishonest, right? So just think about Seattle. They withheld the radiation monitoring. You paid for that, right? You pay for that as a country. You gave them the authority, the equipment, and when it finally happens, we're going to hide that. That's not good. We can't show you that. We don't want you to stay indoors for a week. Just the xenon, which is it'll burn a hole through your lung, by the way, and end up in your bones and mutate your stem cells. But 450,000 times detection levels after Fukushima. So what I meant to say was when you get xenon 133 and in that quality and quantity, you're going to have a full range of absurd fission product in the same samples. So you can do mathematical extrapolation from one of them numbers, and every other number is just of every isotope is going to be frightening. These are catastrophic numbers we're talking about. Saying the highest recorded dose was 23 millisieverts below the accrued 100 millisieverts. Now, you shouldn't be using microsieverts or millisieverts because like Tokyo had 29 million becquerels. To use microsieverts or millisieverts is typically for fuel particulates and stuff like that. The reason they use microsieverts and millisieverts is at the sites, right, where there's direct line of sight of fuel. Becquerels is atoms, physical isotopes. Right, so these plumes are not becquerels. They're not microsieverts, millisieverts. They are becquerels. They're invisible cloud of physical particles of actually. Think of it as a visible snowstorm that you can't see it or smell it, or hear it or taste it or touch it or perceive it. But when it gets in your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells forever and ever and ever. And so if you breathe in 100,000, it treats each of them like a cut in your body. And they pulse energy every second, like little bullets going off in your body at the speed of light every second. And the different isotopes will create in that plume, you're, on top of everything else, you're getting a full body, and the ants and birds and insects and animals and trees and the bacteria and fungus. That's why your forests, you're having such crazy forest fires, because you kill the bacteria and fungus in most of your forest. And this creates a whole body X-ray on top of that, which sterilizes the insects and the birds and the mammals and the animals and the humans, and particularly the babies and the children that are 4 times more susceptible to pathogens or to a compromised immune system, for instance, right? Because their whole body is attacking the radiation sequestered in the muscles, organs, and the bones with white blood cells. And the white blood cells got to displace red blood cells. Red blood cells carry oxygen nutrition. And so if you keep doing that, bioaccumulating it, it's called leukemia, when you start producing more white blood cells than red blood cells. And you can get the same thing from eating it. But this is what happened to our animals. And this is why we're seeing catastrophic effects, where it kills the bacteria and the fungus in the forests and the other material, the ecosystem, so it doesn't break down the forest, the foliage doesn't break down. So eventually when you get lightning strikes and stuff like that, it ignites it. It's much more fuel there for the fire, right? And the ground is not soaking up water anymore because you got rid of all the bacteria and fungus. And the radiation also is liberated back into the environment when you do have the fire on top of that, because the foliage and trees and everything else will bioaccumulate the radiation. And it's pulsing energy always. And when you liberate it back it could be 1 million years, you liberate it back into the environment, it floats around looking for a host anything with replicating cells that it can destroy. And it can do it from very long distances because of the way it pulses energies, which hopes to nail down the long-term impact of Fukushima on ordinary citizens, because nuclear scientists and everybody else are not going near Fukushima. You got to study the slaves. Nuclear academics wouldn't go within 100 kilometers of it for the first number of years. 6 in 10 Fukushima children tested got diabetes. The head of the Tokyo area medical clinic, we're expecting diabetes in children from Fukushima. That's the gallows laugh, by the way. Back to super evil Geoff. Despite efforts to promote the study among evacuees, participation stands at just 21%, because most of the people I've met refuse to fill in the questionnaires. Now, Geoff actually went down there 3 times, right? He's got an extra evil gene into him, you know? Can't hurt me. I'm Geoff. They don't see credibility in what the government does, and they say this is just a survey of guinea pigs. That's what the locals say, and they're right, 100%. When the drinking water in Tokyo is not safe to drink, how can it be safe at ground zero, which is those 14 prefectures, which included Chiba, which is right alongside of Tokyo, by the way. The government was distributing bottled water, and then a few days later they stopped doing it and said it was safe, but it's not safe. They claimed it was iodine. You can't just have iodine. You're going to have the full range. Iodine is just easy to find with the Geiger counters, see? And you can do an accurate reading with it, and then you can do an extrapolation of the uranium, plutonium, and americium, and neptunium, and curium, which is the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods. Since 11th of March, people haven't trusted scientists. So whoever wrote this article, whichever lobbying group, and gave it to Geoff to put his name on at nature.com, were framing a narrative that the trust of scientists was being called into question. And so all the scumbags were panicking because people weren't treating them as gods anymore. The roots of mistrust can be traced to the confusing days immediately after the explosion. And people like Geoff, of course, when authorities made a series of inconsistent statements. Inconsistent! Must be nice to live in a fantasy land like that. Issuing radiation readings that were often turned out to be incorrect. Incorrect! It was a genocide. As the radioisotopes spread from the plant, they're not chemicals no more. Now they're radioisotopes, folks. Geoff is growing up. The government was repeatedly forced to raise its recommended safety limits. Get a bucket, and you might need to throw up. I'll put my big head in there and make sure you need to throw up. As radioactive isotopes spread from the plant, the government was repeatedly forced to raise its recommended safety limits for radiation exposure for the citizens. Oh, no, you're going to be okay. Oh, my God, boss, it's 1.5 million becquerels a kilogram. Raise the limit. That's what they've done. It's just... Otherwise, you've been legally required to evacuate the site. Oh, the victims would have went to safety. That would have been terrible. 16,000 workers quit. 16,000 homeless, destitute, and victims of society, and the immigrants who don't speak the language. I was calling them workers. The victims of society, the only people that go there. Nuclear scientist Geoff went to Fukushima, but not Fukushima. Geoff went to Fukushima 3 times, but not to the... No, I'll pass on the nuke plant, thank you very much. I'm going to follow the bunch of homeless I see running away. Repeatedly forced to raise his recommended safety limits for radiation exposures to citizens. Because the limits kept going, radiation numbers kept going up, so we got no choice, we got to raise the limits. Otherwise, they're going to get hurt, Dana. Way to go, Geoff, man. You're excellent, man. And deep inside of you, there's a little bit of humanity left, I bet, but no one will ever see it again. He can't see it when he looks in the mirror, I bet you. Otherwise, it would have been legally required to evacuate. And so we had to raise the limits for the citizens and the workers, the homeless. There was no workers. If you go to my playlist, I cover that period of time that he's talking about. There was 1,900 pictures released. And we go through every single one of them. Painstakingly, I might add, with documentations for my assertions, unlike Geoff the monster. Geoff the monster, Geoff. He is a monster. When you see that interview I played up earlier, imagine what he was like when he was a bit younger, when he was wild, when he was drinking Hague Gale. As radioisotopes spread from the plant, the government was repeatedly forced to raise its recommended safety limits. Makes me all warm inside how evil they actually are. Authorities hid the radioactive plume forecast to avoid evacuation. That's actually what they were talking about. They were forced to raise the limit so people wouldn't get hurt, Dana. That's what Geoff's telling you. So, in the comments section, tell us, is Geoff evil? I'm going to go in and bring up the comments section. Where's the comments section? Let's bring it up. I want to hear what you think of James, or James got it right away. Look, raise the limit to reduce to harmful rumors. It's more than a narrative, it's a club. Yeah, Fukushima Saisei won all awards for 7 years straight. I'll get back to that. Let's give, let me text Kevin and see if we can get Kevin on for a couple of minutes while we're waiting for anybody to comment about, is Geoff evil, or is he super evil, or is he just an everyday evil person? Let's try Kevin, if I can, because I get so much coming my way. There you go. I'll just text him a quick message. There you go. I just texted Kevin to see if he feels like doing a little couple of minute update. I know he's still hurting. He got out of surgery yesterday, right? But that'll give him a platform, hopefully. It's Cortana. What time is it?
It's 10:48 p.m. in Mount Pearl.
Yeah, go to sleep. Yeah, I'm not going to call Kevin. I text him and see if he gets back to me and wants to come on the show for a minute or more, whatever you like, of course. I don't know what time it is, if he's in a position where he can make the call. He's intensive care, right? And so we're just waiting. Yeah, I forgot to call him Cleveland Marks. Thank you. How are you doing, my friend? While we're waiting for Kevin, let's check the poll. Should mass murderer Geoff Brumfiel, the senior editor of correspondence on the NPR science desk, apologize? Right? That's not asking a lot, is it? Because normally we're not that nice to anybody. It's my last show of the week. We start on Sunday, so I was trying to be a bit mellow. Got no answer from Kevin. I'll keep my ears out. Authorities hid the radioactive plume. Not according to Geoff, Dana. According to Geoff, it was like just going to Disneyland and hanging out for a day, getting on rides, eating cotton candy, Dana. As a result, some Japanese people believe the government is corrupt, and Geoff, of course. Others thinks it is incompetence. Now, Geoff's not incompetence, he's just evil. There's a difference. Prevailing feeling is that what the government says always changes. There is no government, there's people like Geoff, right? They come from a dysfunctional legacy, a dysfunctional pedigree. As radioisotopes spread from the planet, but in positions born into it, right? Born with a silver Geiger counter up his butt. The government was repeatedly forced to raise its recommended safety limits so that people wouldn't get sick, Dana. Yeah, it's like saying I took my shoes off because I wanted to run on the fire. I didn't want to hurt my shoes. And my feet, they can be fixed in 5 or 6 weeks. When Unit 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded in 1986, they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland and Scotland and the United Kingdom, by the way. I got to chew down on the side of my face and talk like Geoff. Situation could have been more different within the first 24 hours. He does it naturally, though. I can't do it that way. He's had a lot of money spent on his teeth, too, but still fucked up, you know? International monitors, representatives of the U.S. government, and concerned citizens like Teo, in an effort to win back the trust of its citizens. It's a bizarre. The whole story is bizarre, but these facets of it is super, super interesting. The government is planning one of the most extensive and costly cleanups. They're going to get every homeless person in Japan, Shanghai them, and take them to Fukushima. And a couple of years ago, right, they wanted to import blue-collar workers for the same jobs they were running at the homeless, right? And we went after them for 6 days straight. Efforts some experts view as unrealistic. Not Geoff, of course, but experts, right? Last autumn, it announced plans to bring radiation doses from the accident to below a millisievert a year, 1,000 microsieverts a year, in as much as the evacuation zone as possible. Well, shouldn't you stop the chain reactions first? Shouldn't you recover whatever fuels left after the detonations and the evaporations and China syndromes and everything else? The goal is based, because they're still splitting the atom, right? They coated the ocean for miles around the place because it threw fuel assemblies out into the bloody ocean. But the goal is based on it, and these were mocked fuel assemblies, by the way. But the goal is based on international standard for the doses received during a normal operation of a nuclear plant, not following an accident. Following an accident, just keep raising the limits until everything is safe. Raise the limits. Is it safe yet? No, I got to raise the limit a couple of more thousand per kilogram. Then everybody's going to be safe. Just double checking if we got any comments I didn't cover. Excellent. James Lucy got it perfect. Raise the limits to reduce the harmful rumors. Brilliant, actually. Yeah, Kevin Blanche is still in the ICU. Let's keep her going in that case. Let's bring up the poll one more time. How's Geoff's poll doing? Should mass murderer Geoff Brumfiel, the senior editor of correspondence at the National Public Radio Science Desk, he got that job because he's a monster. If you're a great monster, you get a extreme position where you're making huge wages. He's got an amazing education. He's like the straw man without the heart, right? It is also seen by veterans in nuclear accidents as highly ambitious given the mountainous and heavily wooded areas around Fukushima. The best thing to do, according to Chernobyl, is to really turn the first meter of soil upside down. Don't tell the Japanese shit like that, said Wolfgang Weiss, who's running Unclear at the time. But if you do that, you would kill the whole ecosystem. Hello?
29,999,999, 30 million.
So 30 million, they killed the whole ecosystem. Oops, I kind of smurfed that one up, did I? Here's a job you never want to get. And this is, remember, this is 2012. We're still on the same story. Citizen cleanup crews carry out decontamination in a nuclear wasteland in Minama Soma. There's 10 million becquerels a kilogram. So 640 million a square meter of cesium. And so there's 100 times more strontium-90, because for every cesium-137 is going to be 100 strontium-90. Got my shirt sleeves on? Yep, check. Got a useless face mask on? Check. Yep. This place is evacuated except for local victims that were sucked into thinking that radiation, by people just like Geoff, right? By thinking that it's safe. Back to Geoff. Now, Geoff, in 2011, he was writing stories each month at nature.com to downplay Fukushima. A 2012 story, March the 7th, a legacy of fear. Many could now safely return home. Mistrust of the government prolongs their exit. You sure it wasn't radioactive fallout? Huh? Because there was lots and lots of radioactive fallout. This model is from France, scumbag France, based on 16 days of radioactive fallout. How did Geoff miss all of this, I wonder? How'd that work, Geoff? Mistrust of the government. It took 7 years, but they were able to go back to the nuclear wasteland and get radiated to visit the graves. They were able to go back and get irradiated without even useless paper suits on. That's just cruel. And TEPCO burns 7,000 paper suits a day, he said. When asked what they're doing with all the radiated suits each day, oh, we burn them in the incinerators. We got a brand new one now. She's big, baby. Mysterious black substances has 1 million becquerels a kilogram of cesium all over Minama Soma. Huh, that's the same spot those people are that Geoff is showing off. Geoff makes a great monster. I got to give him credit, right? He's a real monster. The Japanese authorities, aka monsters like Geoff, acknowledged the problem, Dana. And have started trialing a variety of cleanup methods in Fukushima. Trialing, which is the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society. The most promising pilot project began last November under Japan's Atomic Energy Agency, which was created after the meltdowns. And they're just lunatics, right? They're pointless. They're the controlled opposition like Geoff. Like terrible Geoff. He's a terrible person. Holy crap. With an estimated budget of 10.9 billion yen, 10.9 billion yen is actually a lot of money. Testing various technologies to clean up radioactive material. You can't clean up radioactive material. They picked up 30 to 60 million one-ton bags, was only 3% of the entire land of Fukushima Prefecture. I showed you earlier, food was banned in 14 prefectures, right alongside of Tokyo included. Now look at them, grown food right alongside of one-ton bags of radiation. Geoff's like, that's so cool, I gotta get that on my wall, Dana. The Japanese crazies started trialing cleanup. Now they're going around with pressure washers, pressure washing the farmland, the peach trees and stuff like that, and schoolyards, and they want people to go back there, and kids go back there, get sick down the road of all kinds of illnesses and diseases. You're under assault right away from the white blood cell starts skyrocketing, right? To clean up the radioactive materials in 11 cities. But Geoff had to be super evil to actually go to Fukushima Prefecture. Because why would you do that? Why would you go into the middle of where all the food was banned because of radiation from 55 countries? You're actually missing a part of your brain when you do that. And you're supposed to be educated. Then why would you put yourself in that position where you're going to be breathing in that? And when you go home, you're going to wash that clothing in the laundry that your wife or your kids or whatever, you're going to be using the same laundry. You're going to contaminate their clothing. And this stuff catches up onto you. It's an immediate reaction when it's in your body. It's permanent. Your body attacks it relentlessly for the rest of your life with white blood cells. Keep getting more into you. Now your immune system is also compromised, so you're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses and illnesses and diseases that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign. Citizen cleanup crews in a nuclear wasteland. Well, nuclear scientists are not going there, Dana. I can't say Geoff is not going to go there because he went there 3 times. This is exceptionally stupid. That's exceptional stupidness. Well, they paid for it, Dana. Of course I went. Yeah, but you got to breathe the air, moron. You're not immune. You can imagine how insecure people like that actually are too, right? We've come across thousands of them over the years. But he's different. Give him credit now. He's different. And have started trialing a variety of... You can't clean up radiation in a nuclear wasteland, for God's sake. It's still melting down on top of that. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags, took it to the no-go zone in Akuma, split the bags open 2 kilometers away from the nuclear meltdowns where no one lives, dumped the soil, and are growing food in it. Because they're just evil. And stupid as you get. And just, well, that's evil. To take the one-ton bags, dump them, start growing food in it. See, everything's good, so shut up and leave us alone. That's what Geoff is actually like too, right? He probably gets in some road rage on the way home or at work each day on the way to work. And he's like yelling through his car windows, I work for the National Public Radio. You should respect me. I'm important. The most prominent pilot project began last November when Japan's Atomic Energy Agency, which was created after Fukushima melted down. We already covered that, Dana. Why ain't you getting on with it? I must have double-clicked it. That's when I was mostly remains evacuated. Let me go back to that one. Testing various technology to clean up radioactive materials in 11 cities, towns, and villages whose citizens, whose victims, are mostly remained evacuated. Like, that's not a word you should be seeing in this conversation. There's no way Geoff wrote the story. I'm just a little bit pissed off because he put his name on it. And so he can pretend that he's somebody he's obviously not. Maybe he's a good guy and he's afraid to show that because the industry won't give him any more gigs like this. I am impressed how companies have come up with novel ideas to remove decontaminated cesium based on existing technologies. The deputy director of the degenerate IAEA Fukushima Environmental Safety Center, the director of the International Atomic Energy Agency Fukushima Environmental Center. Now, you don't really hear that very often, acknowledging that spot, right? It's pretty rare for us to come across any stories where they talk about, for example, scouring cesium from the roads. When you hear cesium, that's an insult to you. It's a nasty isotope, don't get me wrong, but it's not by itself. It's absurd to suggest it's only cesium, and that's what they're doing. For example, scouring cesium, which is British terminology, from roads with a high-pressure water jet, you're just spreading it everywhere. So they claimed that they were reclaiming the water they were spraying, they were filtering it, and then reusing it again, right? This is how they were getting around it. I think we covered that yesterday, was it, or the day before? The industry's insane, man. It's not just cesium, you whack job. It's about 1,000 kinds of radioactive material released from Fukushima. And then, so each of these isotopes, that's curium isotope, the biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rods, is, look at all the daughters, right? And here's a study from Ottawa, Canada, of actual disposition, actual radioactive fallout, was sustained for weeks and weeks and weeks. And this is why you see the extermination of all the species. Because people like Geoff made sure we didn't have an opportunity to do the right thing. No, everything's good. You can trust us. We're the good guys. All the daughters of iodine and xenon. Help Wanted ad seeks employees able to carry out a conversation. Well, from the little video I played of Geoff earlier, that one's out the door. Isotopes of krypton and all their daughters. You got to think about all the other isotopes. Hello? Is there anybody home? Isotopes uranium, all their daughters you got to be thinking about. Plutonium and their daughters. Geoff. Not just cesium, Geoff. Geoff. Americium, all their daughters, for instance. Neptunium and all their daughters. La. Cesium and all their daughters. And strontium and all their daughters. It's not just cesium-137. But you already know that, right? Purifying and recycling it. That's a new one on me, actually. That's the only story I know where they claimed that back then. They're talking about with the pressure washers. Yeah, it spreads radiation, but not if you collect it, purify it, which you can't do with radiation, because now you can't get near the filter again. The filter will kill you from 50 feet away. You get how it works? You got to be some kind of evil, man, to sign your name to this story. You really do. And Geoff done it like 15 times. Oh, not only that, he went down there 3 times. And got his little jollies off. Japan's nuclear crisis, Fukushima Legacy of Fear, 2012. You guessed it, Geoff. Many communities are taking matters in their own hands with the help of the independent researchers like Teo. They're removing contaminated soil and conducting other cleanup operations. Yeah, little to the left. Little to the right. But at a central disposal location, Weiss, Wolfgalt, there's still Wolfgang, right? Was the current head of the International Atomic Energy, the degenerate International Atomic Energy Agency at that time. These cleanup operations are just creating a different waste problem. People are not allowed to transport the waste, so they put everything in holes in their properties. So if you're cleaning up radiation on your properties, you're in a nuclear wasteland. So why weren't you evacuated? Because people like Geoff made sure you couldn't have a future. And that's why Geoff, Paul tonight, should mass murderer, Geoff Mass Murderer and Brumfiel, senior editor and correspondent on the National Public Relations Science Desk, apologize to the millions and millions of victims that he created with his deceit and dishonesty. Gotcha. He'd apologize for nothing. If you ran over your kid and the kid was by himself, he'd get out and go through his pockets looking for the lunch money. He'd take the sucker out of the kid's mouth, jump back in his car, and away he goes happy as a lark. The government's ambitious goals for decontamination could harm evacuees by inciting needless fear, said Geoff. And the people that he's quoting is just shocking, isn't it? He got them all. He got all the lawyers lined up to cover his story. There's zero possibility he wrote the story. That's the scary part about Geoff. He put his name on it. The government's ambitious goals for decontamination could harm evacuees by inciting needless fear. And I'm pretty sure at this stage you realize it's not needless fear. Nuclear engineer, I agree Fukushima can be an extinction event. Negative impact is spread across through most of the world. Does that sound like it's contained to anybody? Needless fears, Dina. Mom, Dana's fear-mongering. Jeff's down in his basement right now. Mom, come down here. Dana's fear-mongering. Frontline TEPCO workers, 250. Cleanup and plant workers, 50. First off, that's completely insane to suggest that TEPCO was at the site. Like, first off, how dare you not be honest? It's just such terrible humans on this planet. And Geoff, once you look at Geoff, you start losing hope in humanity because he's in a key position to censor everybody trying to get in with real science at the National Public Radio. He's the worst thing can happen to a National Public Radio. He's a gatekeeper. Not very smart either from what I'm seeing. Setting low standards, low radiation dose limits is already damaging the economy around Fukushima. Setting low radiation. So imagine if you set real numbers. Well, first off, here's ERPA, or UNSCLEAR, United Nations. Average absorbed doses to the red bone marrow for adults. They have similar for children, by the way. Excluding the evacuation areas. So, the third row is becquerels per square meter. The second row over there is the population. The first row is the communities. They didn't evacuate these communities. Fukushima City with 300,000 people at 220,000 becquerels a square meter of just cesium-137. It's the most dishonest lowballing conceivable. And this is proof, though, that all of these people were poisoned permanently. Setting low radiation dose limits is already damaging the economy. What about the victims, though? Why don't you go down there and tell them how lucky they are that you protected them, that you raised the limits so high that they were now safe? It's like I walk up to you and say, well, I'm going to say that 5 bullets can't kill you or even harm you, and I'm going to shoot you 5 times. And what's going to happen? I'm going to get arrested, right? And charged with murder because it hurt you. But because you can't see it or smell it or taste it or hear it or feel it or touch it or perceive it. And because there's 1,800 diseases and illnesses, and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses, heart problems, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. There's, these will show up long before cancer. Cancer is typically latent unless you're eating food from the nuclear wasteland, which you probably are. If you're in Canada, you definitely are. And so when you see all of these communities and the doses, and they were just disposed of like toilet paper, like paper towels, by people like Geoff, so that he can make a paycheck each week. He can pretend he's a big shot to whoever's stupid enough to encounter him. Who's always stupid enough to encounter him. It's just How do you get that evil anyway? How does that actually work? Another scumbag he brings up, the University of Tokyo, says that food with radioactivity lower than 500 becquerels a kilogram is not harmful to human health. That's unbelievably offensive, you would say something like that, by the way. Radiation health specialists, children with 11 becquerels a kilogram start to see heart problems. So what is 500 becquerels a kilogram going to do then, I wonder? Irreversible heart damage for children at 50 becquerels a kilogram. So what the frig is 500 becquerels going to do 10 times more? You tell me, Geoff. I'm really curious. Why don't you call in, Geoff? And enlighten us. I got some real questions. I'd like to pick your fucking mind. Cesium-137 immediately damages the heart muscles, not slow acting. In fact, extreme increases in mortality caused by heart diseases, cardiac. The death rate might give the creeps to some people. A spike in people dying of heart attacks in a single month of 12,600. Again, there's 1,800 illnesses and diseases will take you out before cancer. And, 1,801 if you include Geoff. Mushrooms from Chiba Prefecture, 200 kilometers south of Fukushima, exceeded 100 becquerels a kilogram. Yeah, but, you can't just say cesium. And mushrooms are the worst thing on the planet, by the way, for bioaccumulation. But it gets more twisted. They blame that on weapons fallout, by the way. From nuclear weapons tests in the 50s and 60s, or Chernobyl, but not Fukushima. That's their actual words. You really got to be some sadistic scumbag to say something like that. You really got to be disconnected from any kind of reality. Like, for an industry, that's what you're doing for a living. For an industry, you're going to throw every human and every species under the bus so you can get a paycheck on Fridays. Or a salary all year long, or whatever it is the fuck they give you. You're a horrific, disgusting, despicable creature, Geoff. You're a disgusting example of a human. You're a criminal, 100%, and you don't have a right to be working at the National Public Radio. The world is a terrible place with people like you in a public position like that. You should apologize for being born. Your parents should apologize for not drowning you in a fucking bowl of vomit when you were born. They knew you were going to turn out some degenerate, I'm pretty sure. It's just despicable. You're a despicable person. Plutonium-241 from Fukushima is 70,000 times more than the atomic bomb fallout. No, Dana. No, Dana. No. It was atomic bomb fallout that we found. It wasn't from Fukushima. Despite the fact it was from Fukushima. You see, Fukushima is among the largest rice producers in Japan, which is true, 100%. We talk about this all the time. There's almost 1 billion pounds of rice each year still being produced, and they're exporting twice what they were pre-Fukushima from the prefecture. It's a genocide machine. So how many people can you poison with 1 billion pounds of rice a year? Because we covered this 5 days a week. Week after week after week after week after month after year. After year after year after year. And I don't lie. I don't make shit up like you, Geoff. I'm not a scumbag, degenerate monster like you, Geoff. And our colleagues at the University of Tokyo were concerned that the excessive stringent safety measures, could hinder not only the recovery of the region's agriculture, but also the collection of scientific data. From the University of Tokyo, of course. There's always enough scums to go around, it seems. Continuous cultivation is very important to predict what will happen in the future. Oh, they got you covered. You have no idea, scumbag. They got you covered, okay? They're harvesting food right alongside the 1-ton bags, but not for research, for sale. We don't know if the rice paddies that produce high levels of cesium will do the same this year, scumbag says. You don't know. Actually, you do. And Geoff keeps company with a lot of scum, man. He fits right in perfectly. Backed by strong demand from murderous farmers, the ministry recently decided to allow cultivation in most areas of Fukushima as long as the cities, the villages, and the towns. They gave the farmers Geiger counters and said, if it's over 500 becquerels a kilogram, mix in some rice that's not. Everything's good. We got you covered. But the ministry will only allow experimental cultivation in areas that produces rice containing more than 500 becquerels a kilogram last year. We've covered this to the hilt, and the industry's insane, right? They're just talking about cesium. Nothing else there, only cesium. In April, the Environmental Ministry will begin the nation's full-scale decontamination program. A 990 billion yen recovery roadmap. They're going to clean up 3% of the land where they want people to resettle and grow food. You can't clean it up because you're only touching 3%. And so the next day is just as radioactive as it was the day before. The ministry said that it wants evidence to underpin science. It wants science to underpin this program. They're going to clean up the rest of the planet while you're at it. That first one up in the corner is 20 days later. By the way, the plume covers the whole planet, not most of the planet. We would like to make a detailed plan based on feedback from government-led pilot projects as well as scientific data. Says official decontamination roadmap. I like all the names they're bringing into this conversation, by the way. At the moment, there's no nuclear, because it's just part of the record. We need that, right? There is no clear plan for allowing displaced residents to go home, although which changed dramatically since then, because this is 2012. The government's goal is to ensure that people should not receive a dose in excess of a millisievert per year. But it's not a firm rule. Indeed, locals can already go to villages outside the 20-kilometer restricted zone. I showed you community after community after community after community after community. That was vicious doses that weren't evacuated, including Fukushima City, Koriyama City, and Fukushima City. Almost every household qualified for decontamination, which means you're supposed to dig up every sidewalk, every street, every building, everything in those cities and move them to a nuclear repository, which you don't have. The nuclear industry has created hundreds of thousands of scumbags. And once they get their hooks into them, they believe that the citizens should move back, said the scum degenerate piece of shit. Even in zones where they might receive 28,000 microsieverts a year. Gonzalez agrees, noting that in some parts of the world, natural annual levels of radiation, which has nothing to do with man-made anthropogenic radiation, nothing to do, like man-made radiation is why we got tourist. We don't have tourist laws for natural stuff. In the range of 10 to 100 millisieverts a year. So potassium-40 is what they're talking about when they're talking like that. Potassium-40 is equal to 71 10 millionths of a curie per gram. And so like a gram of strontium would have 120 plus curies per gram. And a curie is 37 billion atoms. So 71 10 millionths of a curie is 0.000071 curies per gram. Means you can have a truckload of it, live by it all your life, and you still won't I get any kind of a harmful radiation exposure because it's a banana, moron. Your Geiger counter, bananas don't set off your Geiger counters unless it's got man-made radiation in it or on it. So, Director of Radioisotopes Center at the University of Tokyo. Lots of scumbags at the University of Tokyo over the years, we noticed. Thinks that the safety margin not so clear-cut. There's various interpretations about what to do in the area of 1 to 20 millisieverts, which is 20,000 microsieverts. Think of it as a microsiever as 150 counts per minute times 20,000. He says he agrees, though, that the public must choose the course of action. Wait a second. The public is not educated in this. This is a very difficult subject. The public can't figure it out on their own, for starters. Not just because the industry made it impossible to comprehend, but because the industry has made it impossible for the average person to comprehend without direction. And the industry is not giving you direction. It's not going to be honest with you because that's pulling the wool from over their eyes by doing that. Geoff. The vice governor suggests a Fukushima draft. All of Japan must face it. Do you do that at coal plants too, I wonder, when you break down, and oil and gas? 16 older should be prepared to die at Fukushima. Too bad Geoff's not 60. We can drop the limits so it can include people like Geoff, though, I bet. The homeless are being sold to companies. This is Forbes. Forbes is disgusting panderer for nuclear industry. Even they were freaked out. UN officials astounded that the homeless are taken to work in Fukushima. I'm trying to talk like Geoff now. I can't do it. At the end of the month, they got nothing. In fact, they were getting $11 a day to work at the nuclear meltdowns. Geoff was getting $11,000 a day to go to Fukushima Prefecture and prance around and get his picture taken and pretend that he's human. Got some of the attributes anyway. Mentally handicapped were working at Fukushima plant. See, Geoff, you actually could have got a job there. And often given second-hand used paper suits that are completely inappropriate for a nuclear meltdown, completely incapable of shielding you from anything. The mentally disabled are working at there. The homeless are treated like disposable people, and Geoff's really good at that. That's Geoff's gig right there, baby. Fred Mettler, a radiologist serving at the unclear, the degenerate UN, despicable UN panel, agrees rather than setting a strict number or limit, he says, the discussion should be more open-ended. We'll tell the people what's there. We'll tell the people what the consequences are. They can decide whether to accept the risk or not. The average person, like the air samples in Tokyo are 270 times more contaminated with just gamma than global weapons fallout peak. So you're supposed to abandon Tokyo, right? And they were going to for quite a few months. The reactors in the immediate aftermath of the accident, operators could do little other than flush the overheated reactors with seawater. No, they couldn't get close to it. The reactors blew up. So we got no reply from Kevin because he's probably sleeping or doing something else. He put out a video today where he's sitting up, but you can tell he's still struggling. Today, the situation at the plant has improved dramatically. Corrosive salt water, the sulfur, created an absurd amount of buckyballs, has been replaced with fresh water that has passed through a filtration system, removed the radioactive cesium before being recycled back into the reactor cores. Think about that statement. Before being recycled back into the reactor cores, saying they're filtering the water and then putting it back on the reactor cores. And so you're talking about the Sari system, S-A-R-R-Y, the Areva system, which was France's system in 2014, hadn't worked, was unused. And it's the same thing with the ALP system in 2014 of April, had yet to function reliably. And because what happens is you're putting radiation into a filter. The filter becomes so, these numbers we're talking about, this is for cubic centimeter, by the way. These are absurd numbers. So when you're putting these numbers on a filter, you can't get near the filter. You got to run away. After 5 or 6 minutes, the filter is giving off neutron bursts and gamma shines and X-rays. These are lethal doses we're talking about. In just a matter of a few minutes, you're definitely going to die within the next couple of weeks. If you stay there for 20 minutes, you're dead on the spot. Right? You can't filter that. You can filter some of it, and that's the problem. The filter now is 1,000 sieverts emissions from it. And another 20 minutes go by, now it's 1,200 sieverts. A couple of hours go by, it's a million sieverts shooting out of this thing. They're pouring water over the corium, the melter reactor core. But Geoff already knows this, right? The groundwater bypass is not having any effect. They failed to deliver on the promise to install $1 billion fence. The ice wall was completely idiotic, because why not build a real wall? The plant continues to leak water. Leak water! The recent seismic activity could hint that looming earthquakes might threaten the planet. They had 1,000 aftershocks, for goodness sakes, or something. The buildings are... Look at Reactor 4, for instance. Here's journalists pretending they're in the fuel pool 100 feet above the wreckage to your left. And Geoff knows all of this. Geoff's not stupid. He's just evil. And there's actually a difference. Right? All that's left is stumps. But kooky Geoff... So he's saying that Fukushima stopped releasing radioactive isotopes in 2012 into the air. In 2018, radiation airborne near the plants were still far higher than the government's max because it's, still melting down, Geoff. And radioactivity into the sea seems to have dispersed with little effect, Dana. Oh, I know you didn't just say that. I went out on research expeditions from Vancouver to Alaska for 4 to 5 months at a time, and the species to your left are exterminated. These are authentic before and after pictures. Was it worth sacrificing all these species so Geoff could have a great job? So nuclear can pretend that they had some redeeming qualities. Was it worth it? Is that worth it? Was it worth it exterminating all these species? I'd done that for 6 years. The species never came back. I've walked the tide pools for 900 kilometers where there's 27,000 islands for 5 months at a time without coming home. Far, far away from everybody and anybody. In fact, I even done the open west coast of British Columbia. It wasn't any fun, but I done it. Every 20 kilometers I set up shop. We tied up the sailboat and then spent days researching both sides of it and then moved another 20 kilometers down the coastline. That information is available at the nuclearproctologist.org. Researchers at the Forestry and Forest Products Research Institute have found earthworms that, the worm's excrement anywhere in Fukushima Prefecture was at 1.4 million becquerels a kilogram. Here they're claiming the worms are 20,000 becquerels per kilogram. The worms themselves, a Saisei with an A. And local bird population seems to have declined by about a third. No, there was absence of birds completely. Tim Massouse also done multiple studies on there, and seen the same thing. A sailor who sails $1 million boats and races and was making his yearly trip said after we left Japan, it felt like the ocean was dead. There was nothing alive for 3,000 miles. We never saw a turtle, dolphins, sharks, or birds. We call them an extinction event in our little insignificant part of the world. Die-off of mammals, birds, reptiles. So many diseases afflicting such a wide variety of species and animals. Names of the science fiction thrillers, hemorrhagic diseases, Slovactic plagues. And studies are now underway to find out why. Hey, I already done the studies. We have the documentation. We have done the research. We are not living in fantasies. We are dealing with reality. Unlike nature.com and people like Geoff. Hateful people like Geoff. And like I said, we're going to have to do 2 parts to this show. That's how evil Geoff actually is. Thanks a lot, Geoff. I can't say I appreciate it. I'm ready to work to the ground, for goodness sakes. March the 15th. So this is where we're going to pick up on Sunday, March the 15th. So March the 15th, he put out 2 papers on March the 15th. They contradicted each other. Nuclear Crisis is that one. Yeah, so what was interesting is the guy who was co-author to him had put out a David Kajanowski, Polak, is he? He put out a story in 2007 of an earthquake in Japan that caused hundreds of radioactive barrels to tip over at a nuclear plant, by the way, and spill open. And here he is in 2011. Yeah, March the 15th, 2011, with his sidekick in crime, Geoff Brumfiel, I'm sorry. Well, like the reality of it is, so let's check the poll again while we're here. Should mass murderer Geoff the mass murderer, senior editor and correspondent at the National Public Radio Science Desk, apologize? Well, he's got a lot of apologizing to do, haven't he? You know, he got away with it for 10 years. Nobody's called him on it for 10 years. And Sunday night I had another show planned, and then we're gathering up the current 24-hour headline cycles at the same time. And I got up this morning and freaking battery was toast in my truck, and I tried the key anyway, and that killed the controller for my Windle and my Flob. So I ordered a new one of them, and cheap on Amazon, thank goodness. $38 to get a replacement. Dealership wanted $400. I got it on Amazon for $38. Score, man. I was worried for a little while, and then I replaced the batteries. The battery, which I should have done this summer, and I knew that anyway. I knew I had a weak battery, and when it was getting cold, it would be hard to start, and like an idiot. So when I looked it up anyway on YouTube, why the windows wouldn't. Now the other windows are working, but not the driver's window. The mirror works, but the door doesn't lock. And I found 3 videos saying that's normal for the Hummer. Is if you run the battery flat, it'll kill the modular in the master control switch. They're easy to change. They're a little tricky to get out, but they're easy to change. And so I got a replacement for $38 I already ordered in. And got a new battery. So that was... And we raised 160 last night with James Lucid. So thank you, James, for that. That couldn't be better timing. And it couldn't be more amazing timing, really. And I was going to buy a snow plow for the quad because we still got, say 3 months of snow left coming. And I got so busted up this week, I can't do it anymore. And there's a couple for sale for around $250, and that's what I was going to do. But it's better to solve that, because if that happens somewhere else and I'm stuck somewhere, that's not going to go over very good, right? Because once the snow starts falling, we're going to be going on expeditions again. I'm looking for tracks in the woods, and we're going to have 4 or 5 days of rain this week, but then the weather should get to winter, hopefully, or not. So I don't really care, actually, if the winter comes or not, but it usually comes here. And so last year, we went in the woods. It was 14 birds we counted all winter in the forest. 14. Like small birds. And so this year, I'd like to go back and do the same study area. But also, we want to check tracks, right? Because you can spot the animals after fresh snow falls. So whenever there's fresh snowfall, I can head back in on the grid and look for any new migratory or any residential tracks, right? And bird tracks included. But that worked out super good, I thought. So should mass murderer Geoff, this is the final call. Brumfiel, senior editor at the National Public Radio. I'm trying to get some audio background come up for us. Should mass murderer Geoff Brumfiel, senior editor correspondence on National Public Radio Science Desk, apologize? Well, he should be fired, right? He should be jailed. He should apologize to all the victims that he threw under the bus, so a couple billion people. And he should apologize to the survivors of the people that died because they believed his lies. And so the kids and the victims left behind, he owes all of them an apology. And I disrespect him for doing what he done. He's smart enough, he could have got a real job. He didn't need to be a scumbag for the rest of his life. Or did he? I don't know. Maybe he did. Maybe that's his thing, see? So that's it for the poll. Let's end the poll. Let's say goodnight to everybody. Good night, everybody. Just kidding. Let me give a quick shout out. Thinker, John Shiflett, Port Angeles, John Curtis, Blue Jay Outpost, Albert. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. Great weekend. And we'll be back on Sunday unless there's a major event in the nuclear industry or Japan with earthquakes or something like that. James Lucid again. James, over the top, my friend. Thank you. And James mentioning dead birds floating in the sea, right? Last year, the first day I went out on the ocean, I found 5 dead birds right away. One of them, and we'd done the video and the pictures of it, had half of a head, the other half was a tumor. It was really, really, really just... really something. I got to dig up those pictures again. There was I know roughly a word or two off the top of my head. It's been a while, so I should show them again. And so good night to everybody. Hugs for everybody. Ink gesture. Fuyuno again. Man, why do people got to have such weird names? I'm just scanning through quickly. We're going to do a quick shout out. We'll call it a night. So we got 5 big shows in this week, right? That was fantastic, I thought. 5 real shows. Tonight was a great show. Geoff desperately needed to be shit on after getting away with it for 10 years. And it's not like I'm going to get... He might never know the video's there. I did tweet it out to him and the NRP, the National Radio, that he works for, and directly at him. Don Vincent, so, because I'm not going to shy away. Invisible Rabbit. Another Gmail. Cleveland Marco was here. He's been around a very long time. Dana Nasana couldn't make it for the show. And he does enough anyway. Jackie Flowers. Thursday night's a weird night for a lot of people. And the video's here for everybody to watch whenever they get the chance anyway, right? Savannah's 4th. Remind your people that when you leave comments a couple hours before the show starts on the preamble, the show might not be there. The comment might not be there when the show starts because Google likes to remove them after an hour or two before in the preamble only. We've seen this. This has been going on for years and years. Angels Plays. I know Colette S is out there somewhere tonight. Or out there later for sure. Hardcore. The hardcores are always out there. Richard. And I love each and every one of them. The hardcores are the best. Well, the truth is the best, right? Vitra, we're almost through. Coming down to the most recent comments. Here we go. Yeah, prayers for Kevin. Great stuff. Thank you. Yeah, we got everybody, it looks like. Good stuff. Excellent. We'll see everybody on Sunday night. The night of the monsters. The night of the monsters is tonight too, right? So yeah, Geoff turned out to be a real life monster, like the thousands of other ones, but he was just a little bit more sick in the head. His lies were just a little more twisted. His hatred for us was just a little deeper. And for all the precious, wonderful species of the planet. He stands out as a scumbag above scumbags. We salute you, scumbag. And everybody else, have a hugs and great weekend. We'll see everybody on Sunday. If you made it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. If not, what's the point of having a thumbs up button? Good night, folks. Take care.
Wir betreten Feuer drum